Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the fascinating and frankly horrifying world of medieval dental care. Picture this. You're walking through a bustling medieval marketplace, the air thick with the scent of unwashed bodies, rotting food, and something that makes you wrinkle your nose. It's the unmistakable smell of widespread tooth decay. Because in this world, a bright white smile isn't just rare, it's practically mythical. You glance around at the faces surrounding you, and you notice something unsettling. Nearly every mouth you glimpse is missing teeth, stained brown and black, or sporting gaps where molars once lived. The lucky ones still have most of their teeth, though lucky is relative when those teeth are riddled with cavities and causing constant, throbbing pain. You're standing in an era where the concept of preventive dental care is about as foreign as the idea of flying to the moon. This is a time when people genuinely believed that tiny worms lived inside your teeth and gnawed away at them from the inside out, causing all that excruciating pain. You probably won't survive this revelation, but medieval people had a life expectancy that rarely exceeded 40 years, and dental problems played a significant role in that grim statistic. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is in your corner of the world. Drop a comment and let me know, are you drifting off in London at midnight, or maybe catching this during a late afternoon in California? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're living in a world where dental care is a brutal mixture of superstition, desperation, and occasional accidental effectiveness. The year could be 1200 or 1400, it doesn't matter much because dental practices remained remarkably consistent throughout the medieval period. Consistently terrible, that is, your teeth are precious commodities that you'll likely lose one by one, and there's very little you can do about it except pray to the right saints and hope your local barber surgeon has steady hands. Let's start with what medieval people actually knew about teeth, which wasn't much, but was delivered with absolute confidence. The prevailing medical theory of the time operated on the concept of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Everything that went wrong in your body, including dental problems, was attributed to an imbalance of these mystical fluids. If you had a toothache, it meant you had too much heat in your head, or perhaps an excess of moist humors corrupting your jaw. The solution? Well, that's where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely terrifying. You see, medieval medical practitioners believed that the human body was like a delicate ecosystem that could be thrown off balance by anything from eating the wrong foods to looking at someone cross-eyed during a full moon. Your teeth, being made of what they assumed was essentially bone, were subject to the same humoral imbalances as the rest of your body. This meant that treating a toothache often involved treatments that had absolutely nothing to do with your actual teeth. The medieval understanding of anatomy was, to put it mildly, creative. Most medical knowledge came from ancient Greek and Roman texts, particularly the works of Galen, a Roman physician who had dissected animals but never humans. This led to some spectacular misconceptions about how the human body actually worked. For instance, many medieval doctors believed that teeth were connected directly to the brain by a series of invisible channels, which explained why toothaches could cause headaches. They weren't entirely wrong about the connection between dental pain and head pain, but their explanation involved mystical vapors rising through secret passages in your skull. Imagine waking up in your medieval hovel with a throbbing molar that feels like someone's hammering nails into your jaw. You stumble to your small, greasy window and peer out at the gray dawn breaking over your village. The pain is so intense that you can barely think straight, but you know you need help. The question is, where do you turn? There's no dentist's office down the street, no emergency room to visit, no ibuprofen to pop. You have exactly 3 options, and they're all terrible. Your first option is to suffer in silence and hope the tooth falls out on its own, which it probably will, given enough time and agony. Your second option is to visit the local barber surgeon, who will enthusiastically offer to yank the offending tooth out with whatever tools he has handy, probably the same pliers he uses to shoe horses. Your third option is to seek out the village wise woman or monk, who will provide you with a bewildering array of herbal concoctions, mystical incantations, and advice that ranges from marginally helpful to completely insane. The social implications of dental problems in medieval times were staggering. Your smile or lack thereof immediately broadcast your social status, your age, and your overall health to anyone who looked at you. The wealthy might have slightly better teeth simply because they could afford more varied diets and occasionally consulted with educated physicians, but even kings and queens suffered from devastating dental problems. In fact, some historians argue that the medieval obsession with covering the lower face with veils and elaborate headwear wasn't just about modesty or fashion, it was partly about hiding the reality of widespread dental decay. You're living in an age where sugar is still a rare and expensive luxury, imported from distant lands at tremendous cost. This means that the primary causes of tooth decay aren't the candies and sodas that plague modern teeth, but rather other factors that medieval people couldn't control. Poor nutrition, lack of understanding about oral hygiene, and the grinding effects of coarse bread filled with gritty particles from stone mills all contributed to rapid dental deterioration. The medieval diet was rough on teeth in ways that might surprise you. Bread, the staple food for most people, was often contaminated with bits of stone and grit from the grinding process. Every meal essentially involved chewing on sandpaper, slowly wearing away the enamel and creating perfect conditions for decay. Add to this the medieval habit of using teeth as tools for cutting thread, cracking nuts, or even opening bottles, and you have a recipe for dental disaster. But here's where medieval dental care gets truly bizarre: the treatments. Since the cause of dental problems was mysterious, the cures were equally mystical. You might find yourself prescribed a mixture of ground pearls and unicorn horn to rub on your gums, or perhaps your local healer would recommend holding a live frog in your mouth until it died, believing that the frog would absorb the evil humors causing your toothache. These weren't fringe treatments practiced by eccentric healers in remote villages. These were mainstream medical practices recommended by the most educated physicians of the time. The medieval medical establishment operated on the principle that like cures like, which led to some spectacularly illogical treatments. If your tooth was causing you hot pain, the cure might involve cooling remedies like placing ice on your jaw. But if the pain was deemed to be caused by cold humors, you might be advised to hold burning coals near your face. The fact that neither of these approaches actually worked was less important than maintaining the theoretical framework that governed all medieval medicine. You're also living in a world where the line between medicine and magic is practically non-existent. Your local healer might prescribe prayers and pilgrimages alongside herbal remedies and surgical procedures. The medieval mind didn't see any contradiction between seeking divine intervention and applying earthly treatments. Both were simply different approaches to solving the same fundamental problem of illness and pain. Consider the medieval belief in sympathetic magic. which suggested that objects or creatures that resembled teeth could be used to treat dental problems. This led to treatments involving ground-up animal teeth, particularly those of wild boars or wolves, mixed into pastes and applied to aching human teeth. The logic was that the strength and sharpness of predator teeth would somehow transfer to your own failing dentition. The economic impact of dental problems in medieval society was enormous. A person who couldn't chew properly couldn't maintain proper nutrition, which led to weakness, illness, and reduced productivity. In a world where most work was physical labor, being weakened by constant tooth pain could mean the difference between survival and starvation. This created a vicious cycle where poor dental health led to poor overall health, which led to poverty, which led to even worse dental care. Medieval chroniclers occasionally recorded particularly dramatic dental incidents, giving us glimpses into just how desperate people became when faced with severe tooth pain. One 13th century account describes a blacksmith who attempted to extract his own tooth using red-hot pincers, reasoning that the heat would kill whatever evil was causing his pain. Predictably, this approach resulted in severe burns and infection, though the chronicler noted with some admiration that the man's tooth pain did indeed stop mainly because he died 3 days later. Historians still argue whether medieval people actually believed in the effectiveness of these treatments or whether they continued using them simply because no alternatives existed. The evidence suggests a combination of both genuine belief in humoral theory combined with desperate hope that something, anything, might provide relief from constant dental pain. The medieval understanding of tooth development was equally fascinating and wrong. Many believed that teeth grew throughout a person's life, like fingernails or hair, which explained why some people seemed to have better teeth than others. They were simply better at growing them. This led to treatments designed to encourage tooth growth, including rubbing the gums with various substances believed to promote dental regeneration. You're stepping into a world where a simple cavity could spiral into a life-threatening infection, where the cure was often worse than the disease, and where the best dental advice available was to pray harder and avoid looking at your reflection in still water during a new moon, lest you anger the spirits responsible for tooth health. It's a world that would make your worst dental appointment look like a luxury spa treatment. You're standing outside the workshop of Master Geoffrey, the local barber surgeon, clutching your swollen jaw as waves of pain crash through your skull. The wooden sign hanging above his door depicts a bloody tooth dangling from a pair of rusty pliers. Hardly the most reassuring advertisement. But when you're desperate, symbolism takes a back seat to necessity. You can hear the sound of metal scraping against metal from inside, along with what sounds distinctly like muffled screaming. Welcome to medieval dentistry, where your barber doubles as your surgeon, your dentist, and occasionally your undertaker. The medieval barber surgeon occupied a unique and terrifying position in society. These weren't trained medical professionals in any sense we'd recognize today. They were craftsmen who happened to own sharp instruments and weren't particularly squeamish about using them on human bodies. Your typical barber surgeon learned his trade through apprenticeship, watching an older practitioner hack away at various body parts until he felt confident enough to start hacking away at his own patients. It was essentially a learn-by-doing approach to medicine, which worked out exactly as well as you'd expect. You push open the heavy wooden door and step into Geoffrey's workshop, immediately assaulted by a mixture of smells that shouldn't exist in the same space-fresh bread from the bakery next door, the metallic tang of blood, burning hair, and something else that your nose refuses to identify. The room is cramped and dimly lit, with tools hanging from every available surface. You see razors, scissors, knives of various sizes, and yes, those infamous dental pliers that have been haunting your nightmares since you decided to seek professional help. Jeffrey looks up from sharpening a particularly wicked-looking blade and grins at you with his own gap-toothed smile. He's a stocky man in his 50s, with powerful arms developed from years of wrestling with reluctant patience and stubborn teeth. His apron is stained with what you hope is just rust, and his hands bear the permanent marks of his trade-small scars, burn marks, and fingernails that haven't been properly cleaned since the Crusades began. Ah, another toothache victim, he announces cheerfully, as if you've just won some sort of prize. Come, let's have a look at the offending dental criminal. He gestures toward a wooden chair that looks suspiciously like it's been reinforced with metal straps. You notice dark stains on the armrests that definitely aren't wine. The barber surgeon's approach to dental problems was refreshingly direct. If it hurt, remove it. There was no concept of dental preservation, no attempts at cleaning or filling cavities, no consideration of whether the tooth might be saved. Pain meant extraction, and extraction meant grabbing the biggest pliers available and pulling until something gave way. The fact that this approach often resulted in broken teeth, fractured jaws, and massive infections was considered an acceptable risk. You settle nervously into the chair as Jeffrey begins his examination, which consists primarily of poking at your swollen jaw with fingers that smell like they've been sampling the contents of a medieval latrine. Yes, definitely evil humors, he declares with authority. I can feel the corruption spreading. We'll need to remove the tooth immediately before the wickedness travels to your brain and turns you into a drooling idiot. The tools of the medieval dental trade were essentially whatever sharp or gripping implements happened to be available. Your barber surgeon might use actual dental pliers if he could afford them, but more commonly relied on blacksmith's tools, horseshoeing equipment, or even modified kitchen utensils. The key was having something that could grip a tooth firmly enough to yank it from its socket, regardless of how much damage this caused to surrounding tissue. The workshop itself tells the story of medieval multi-specialization. You notice piles of freshly cut hair in one corner, surgical instruments soaking in questionable liquids, and what appears to be a collection of human teeth arranged by size and color. Jeffrey's business model was beautifully efficient. Why specialize in one form of human maintenance when you could offer the complete package? Haircuts, tooth extraction, bloodletting, minor surgery, and even embalming services were all available under one roof. Jeffrey selects his weapon of choice, a pair of pliers that look like they were forged in the depths of hell and have never met a cleaning cloth. Now, this might cause some discomfort, he says with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. In medieval medicine, some discomfort was code for agony beyond human comprehension, but you're too desperate to back out now. The extraction process itself was brutal in ways that would make modern torture specialists wince. There was no anesthesia beyond perhaps a cup of strong wine or a leather strap to bite down on. The barber surgeon would simply grip the offending tooth with his pliers and pull, twist, and leverage until either the tooth came out or something important broke. Success was measured not by patient comfort or proper technique, but by whether the tooth eventually separated from the jaw. You watch in fascination and horror as Jeffrey prepares his workspace, laying out various instruments with the care of a craftsman who takes pride in his work. There are pliers of different sizes, small hammers, thin metal picks, and several items whose purpose you prefer not to contemplate. He notices your stare and chuckles. "23 years I've been pulling teeth," he says with obvious pride. "Started when I was barely 14, apprenticed to old Master Harold. God rest his soul. That man could extract a molar faster than you could say a Hail Mary." The social aspect of medieval dental extraction was equally fascinating and horrifying. These procedures often attracted crowds of onlookers, turning medical treatment into public entertainment. Neighbors would gather to watch, offering encouragement, advice, and sometimes even placing bets on how long the procedure would take or whether the patient would survive it. It was the medieval equivalent of reality television, except with more blood and screaming. You feel Jeffrey's powerful hands position your head in what he considers the optimal angle for tooth extraction, which turns out to be whatever position gives him the best leverage while completely ignoring your comfort or ability to breathe. The pliers close around your infected molar with a grinding sensation that makes your vision blur. "Ready?" he asks, not waiting for an answer before beginning to pull. The pain is indescribable. It's not just the sensation of having a piece of your body forcibly removed, it's the grinding, tearing, cracking sounds that accompany medieval dental extraction. You can feel your tooth shifting in ways that teeth definitely shouldn't shift, accompanied by popping sensations as roots tear free from bone and tissue. Jeffrey grunts with effort, bracing one foot against the chair for additional leverage. Medieval barber surgeons developed various techniques for dealing with stubborn teeth that refused to cooperate with extraction attempts. Some would heat their pliers over an open flame, believing that hot metal would somehow make the process easier. Others preferred to use multiple tools simultaneously, attacking the tooth from different angles like a coordinated assault on a castle wall. The patient's preferences were rarely considered in these strategic decisions. "Ah, this one's being particularly stubborn," Jeffrey mutters, wiping sweat from his forehead with a blood-stained cloth. Sometimes they develop deep roots when the evil humors have been festering for too long. "No matter, I've never met a tooth I couldn't convince to leave." His confidence would be reassuring if it weren't accompanied by the sound of your jawbone creaking under pressure. He calls over his apprentice, a scrawny boy of perhaps 12 who looks like he's seen too much for his age. "Thomas, bring me the leverage bar," Jeffrey orders. This tooth thinks it's cleverer than we are. The leverage bar turns out to be a metal rod that Jeffrey wedges against your other teeth, using your own mouth as a fulcrum to increase his pulling power. Medieval engineering at its finest. The apprentice system for barber surgeons was both practical and terrifying. Young boys would start by sweeping hair and cleaning blood, gradually working their way up to holding patients down during procedures and eventually performing simple extractions themselves. There was no formal education, no textbooks, no standardized training, just years of watching and occasionally being allowed to practice on the poor and desperate. You hear Jeffrey explaining his technique to Thomas as he works. "See how I'm gripping the tooth at its base? That's where the strength is. And notice how I'm pulling straight up, not at an angle. Angled pulls just break the tooth off at the gum line, and then you've got a real mess to deal with." His lecture continues as your tooth slowly loosens, accompanied by sounds that shouldn't come from human mouths. The economics of medieval dental extraction were surprisingly complex. Barber surgeons operated small businesses that needed to balance the cost of tools and materials against what their customers could afford to pay. A simple extraction might cost a day's wages for a common laborer, while complex procedures could require payment in goods, services, or future labor. Some practitioners offered payment plans, though the terms were rarely favorable to the patient. Almost there now, Jeffrey announces cheerfully, apparently oblivious to the fact that you've lost the ability to make coherent sounds. I can feel it starting to give way. The tooth is admitting defeat. His enthusiasm for his work is genuinely infectious. Even under these circumstances, you find yourself oddly grateful for his confidence, even as you question every decision that led you to this moment. The broader medical community of the time viewed barber surgeons with a mixture of respect and suspicion. University-trained physicians looked down on them as mere craftsmen, while the common people often preferred them to learned doctors whose treatments were expensive and ineffective. Barber surgeons occupied a middle ground between folk medicine and academic medicine, combining practical experience with just enough theoretical knowledge to be dangerous. Finally, after what feels like hours but was probably only minutes, you hear a wet tearing sound followed by Jeffrey's triumphant, "Aha!" He holds up your former tooth, now looking significantly smaller and more pathetic than something that caused so much trouble. The tooth is completely intact, which Jeffrey considers a mark of professional pride, though you notice it's trailing several long, bloody roots that definitely weren't supposed to come out. Beautiful extraction, Jeffrey declares, showing the tooth to his apprentice and the small crowd that has gathered to watch the proceedings. See how clean the roots came out? That's the mark of proper technique. None of that hack-and-saw nonsense you see from the quacks down in the market square. He drops your tooth into a collection jar that contains dozens of other extracted teeth in various states of decay. The aftermath of medieval dental extraction was often worse than the original problem. With no understanding of sterilization or infection control, the open wound left behind became a perfect breeding ground for bacteria. Medieval barber surgeons might pack the socket with various substances ranging from herbs that were actually helpful to materials like ground glass or metal filings that definitely weren't. Jeffrey examines his handiwork with satisfaction, apparently oblivious to the fact that you're bleeding profusely and making sounds that aren't quite human. Excellent work, if I do say so myself, he declares. That should take care of the evil humors. The bleeding will stop eventually, and if it doesn't, well, that just means we got all the corruption out. He hands you a piece of cloth that might have been white sometime during the previous century and instructs you to bite down on it to control the bleeding. The cloth tastes like it's been used for similar purposes many times before, without much washing in between patients. Medieval concepts of hygiene were, to put it charitably, still evolving. The aftercare instructions from medieval barber surgeons were a fascinating mixture of practical wisdom and complete nonsense. Jeffrey advises you to avoid hot foods, which is actually sensible advice, but also suggests that you should sleep sitting up for 3 nights to prevent evil vapors from settling in the wound. He recommends rinsing your mouth with wine mixed with ground unicorn horn, which was expensive enough that most people settled for wine mixed with salt. Historians still argue whether medieval barber surgeons genuinely believed their techniques were medically sound or whether they simply did their best with the limited knowledge and tools available. The evidence suggests that most practitioners were sincere in their efforts to help patients, even when their methods were spectacularly misguided. They developed elaborate theoretical frameworks to justify their approaches and took genuine pride in their surgical skills. The guild system that governed medieval crafts included barber surgeons, who formed professional associations with rules about training, pricing, and territory. These guilds helped maintain standards, though the standards they maintained wouldn't impress modern medical professionals. A guild-certified barber surgeon had demonstrated the ability to extract teeth, perform bloodletting, and handle basic surgical procedures without killing too many patients. As you stumble out of Jeffrey's workshop, your mouth packed with dubious cloth and your jaw throbbing with a new and different kind of pain, you reflect on the medieval approach to dental care. It was direct, decisive, and completely unconcerned with modern concepts like patient comfort or long-term outcomes. The tooth was gone, which meant the problem was solved, regardless of any new problems that might have been created in the process. You're lying in your medieval bed, straw poking through the rough fabric beneath you, pressing the blood-soaked cloth to your empty tooth socket while contemplating the medieval explanation for what just happened to you. According to every learned authority of your time, your tooth pain wasn't caused by decay, poor diet, or lack of hygienite was caused by tiny worms. Yes, actual living worms that somehow found their way into your teeth and began gnawing tunnels through the enamel like the world's smallest and most persistent miners. Welcome to the bizarre world of medieval dental theory, where scientific explanation meets fever dream. The tooth worm theory wasn't some fringe belief held by village idiots and desperate quacks. It was mainstream medical doctrine, endorsed by the most respected physicians and scholars of the medieval world. This theory had ancient roots, literally stretching back to Mesopotamian civilizations, and by the medieval period, it had evolved into an elaborate explanatory framework that attempted to account for every aspect of dental disease. The basic premise was elegantly simple. Worms lived in your teeth, and when they got hungry or agitated, they caused pain by eating their way through your dental tissue. You can almost picture these microscopic creatures as medieval people imagined them, tiny serpentine beings with voracious appetites and a particular fondness for human tooth enamel. Medieval medical texts described them in surprising detail, complete with illustrations that showed worm-like creatures with gaping mouths burrowing through cross-sections of teeth. These weren't abstract metaphors or symbolic representations. Medieval people genuinely believed these worms were physical entities that could be observed, fought, and hopefully defeated. The evidence for tooth worms seemed overwhelming to medieval minds. After all, when you looked at a decayed tooth, you could clearly see holes and tunnels that appeared to have been carved by something. What else could create such perfect cylindrical passages through solid tooth material except tiny creatures designed specifically for that purpose? The pain came in waves, suggesting that the worms were active at certain times and dormant at others. Sometimes you could even feel things moving in your mouth during particularly severe toothaches. That was the worms shifting position or fighting amongst themselves. Medieval physicians developed elaborate taxonomies of tooth worms, categorizing them by size, aggressiveness, and preferred habitat within the mouth. Some worms were believed to be small and industrious, creating tiny holes that caused persistent but manageable pain. Others were described as large and ravenous, capable of devastating entire teeth in a matter of days. The most feared were the wandering worms that could migrate from tooth to tooth, spreading corruption throughout the mouth like a medieval dental plague. The life cycle of tooth worms was a subject of intense scholarly debate. Some authorities believed they were spontaneously generated within the mouth by the same forces that created maggots in rotting meat. Others argued that they entered the body through food or drink, perhaps as invisible eggs that hatched when exposed to the warmth and moisture of the human mouth. A few scholars proposed that tooth worms were actually a form of divine punishment, sent by God to torment those who had committed sins related to gluttony or vanity. Medieval medical texts provided detailed instructions for identifying different types of toothworm infestations. If your pain was sharp and sudden, you were dealing with young, active worms that were still growing and exploring their new home. Dull, Throbbing pain indicated mature worms that had settled into comfortable feeding patterns. Pain that worsened at night was attributed to nocturnal worms that preferred to work under cover of darkness, while pain that intensified during meals was blamed on competitive worms that became agitated when you tried to eat their territory. You remember the traveling physician who visited your village last summer, a learned man who claimed to have studied at the great medical schools of Paris and Salerno. He demonstrated his toothworm expertise by examining several villagers' mouths with a small mirror and declaring that he could actually see the worms moving. He pointed out tiny white specks in decayed teeth that he claimed were baby worms, and darker areas that he said were worm tunnels. His confidence was absolute, and his explanations were so detailed that nobody thought to question them. The seasonal behavior of toothworms was another area of extensive medieval research. Many physicians observed that dental problems seemed to worsen during certain times of the year, particularly in spring when the weather was warming up. This led to theories about worm hibernation and mating cycles. Spring was considered peak worm season, when the creatures awakened from winter dormancy and began aggressive feeding and reproduction. Autumn brought a different set of risks, as worms were believed to prepare for winter by storing food within tooth cavities. Different types of food were thought to either attract or repel toothworms. Sweet foods, particularly honey and fruit, were believed to draw worms like magnets, explaining why people who could afford such luxuries often had worse teeth than those who subsisted on plain bread and gruel. Spicy foods were thought to irritate established worm colonies, causing them to burrow more aggressively and create additional pain. Cold foods could supposedly stun worms temporarily, providing brief relief from dental agony. The connection between toothworms and overall health was considered extremely serious. Medieval physicians believed that well-established worm colonies could serve as launching points for more extensive bodily invasions. Worms could migrate from teeth to the jaw, then to the skull, and eventually to the brain, causing madness, seizures, and death. This explained why some people with severe dental problems also suffered from headaches, mental confusion, and neurological symptoms. Medieval scholars developed sophisticated theories about worm communication and social behavior. Some believed that toothworms could send chemical signals to their neighbors, coordinating attacks on particularly stubborn teeth. Others proposed that worms had primitive intelligence and could learn to avoid certain foods or treatments that had proven harmful to their colonies. A few authorities suggested that toothworms could hibernate for years, explaining why dental problems sometimes disappeared for long periods before suddenly returning with renewed intensity. The medieval understanding of worm nutrition was equally elaborate. Primary worms were thought to feed directly on tooth material, slowly consuming enamel and dentin like microscopic termites. Secondary worms supposedly fed on the waste products of primary worms, creating a complex ecosystem within each infected tooth. Some scholars identified carnivorous worms that preyed on other worms, which could explain why dental pain sometimes suddenly decreased without treatment. The predator worms had eaten their plant-eating cousins. The geographical distribution of toothworms was believed to vary significantly. Worms from northern climates were thought to be hardier but slower moving, while southern worms were considered more aggressive but less resistant to treatment. Coastal worms supposedly had different characteristics than mountain worms, and urban worms were believed to be more sophisticated than their rural counterparts. This geographical taxonomy allowed medieval physicians to tailor their treatments based on where they practiced and where their patients had lived. You recall listening to heated debates between traveling scholars about the exact mechanism by which worms entered teeth. One faction insisted that worms were airborne, floating invisibly in the breath of infected individuals and settling in the mouths of new victims. Another group argued for the contaminated food theory, claiming that worms originated in spoiled grain and infected anyone who ate bread made from compromised wheat. A third camp proposed that worms were present in all human mouths from birth but remained dormant until triggered by specific conditions. The classification system for tooth worms was impressively detailed. Medieval medical texts described boar worms that created straight tunnels, spiral worms that followed curved paths through teeth, and surface worms that preferred to work along the gum line. Each type required different treatment approaches and posed distinct threats to overall dental health. Advanced practitioners claimed they could identify worm species by the pattern of damage they created, much like modern forensic experts analyzing tool marks. The reproductive habits of tooth worms fascinated medieval scholars. Some believed that worms reproduced by splitting in half when they reached maturity, explaining why small cavities often became larger ones. Others proposed that worms laid microscopic eggs in healthy teeth, creating dormant infestations that wouldn't manifest symptoms for months or years. The most elaborate theories suggested that tooth worms had complex mating rituals involving the exchange of chemical signals across multiple teeth. Medieval physicians developed an entire diagnostic framework based on toothworm behavior. The timing of pain could indicate whether you were dealing with diurnal or nocturnal worm species. The intensity of discomfort revealed the size and aggressiveness of your particular worm colony. Changes in pain patterns over time showed whether the worms were growing, reproducing, or preparing to migrate to new locations within your mouth. The international scholarly community took toothworm research very seriously. Medieval universities featured lectures on worm anatomy and behavior. Students were required to memorize the characteristics of different worm species and demonstrate their ability to identify infestations through careful examination. Advanced courses covered the latest developments in anti-worm therapy and the theoretical foundations of worm-based disease progression. Historians still argue whether medieval people genuinely believed in the physical reality of toothworms or whether they understood the theory as a useful metaphor for explaining dental disease. The evidence suggests that most people, including educated physicians, accepted toothworms as literal truth. Medieval medical texts contain detailed discussions of worm anatomy, breeding habits, and behavioral patterns that would be unnecessary if the authors understood they were dealing with metaphorical creatures. The toothworm theory also provided a convenient explanation for why dental treatments sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. If a particular remedy succeeded in relieving pain, it meant the worms had been killed or driven away. If the same treatment failed in a different patient, the worms in that mouth must have been a more resistant variety, or perhaps the treatment hadn't been applied correctly. This theoretical framework was flexible enough to accommodate any outcome, making it practically impossible to disprove. You recall the village-wise woman explaining that toothworms could be influenced by phases of the moon, astrological alignments, and the patient's moral character. Virtuous people supposedly had smaller, less aggressive worms, while sinners harbored large, vicious colonies that were nearly impossible to eliminate. This moral dimension added another layer to dental treatment, as patients were encouraged to confess their sins and perform penance alongside whatever physical remedies they received. The economic implications of toothworm theory were substantial. Merchants specialized in anti-worm preparations, traveling from market to market with secret formulas guaranteed to eliminate even the most stubborn infestations. Some practitioners offered worm removal services, claiming they could physically extract the creatures using specialized instruments. Others sold protective amulets and charms designed to prevent worm infestations in healthy teeth. Medieval agricultural practices were also influenced by toothworm theory. Farmers believed that certain crops were more likely to harbor worm eggs, leading to elaborate storage and preparation rituals designed to eliminate dental threats from the food supply. Mills were required to sift grain multiple times to remove potential worm contamination, and bakers developed special techniques for preparing bread that wouldn't attract toothworms. The international nature of the toothworm theory is fascinating to consider. Medieval scholars from England to Byzantium, from Islamic Spain to the furthest reaches of Eastern Europe, all accepted variations of this explanation for dental disease. The theory transcended religious, cultural, and linguistic boundaries, suggesting either that it was based on genuine observation of natural phenomena or that human beings have a remarkable capacity for collective delusion when faced with mysterious and painful conditions. Medieval artists and manuscript illuminators created detailed visual representations of toothworms, often depicting them as tiny dragons or serpents with elaborate scales and menacing expressions. These illustrations weren't intended as artistic fantasies, they were educational materials designed to help physicians recognize and understand their dental adversaries. Some manuscripts showed worms engaging in epic battles within the mouth, fighting over territory and resources like microscopic medieval armies. The religious implications of toothworm theory were complex and far-reaching. Some theologians argued that worms were part of God's natural order, serving to punish the wicked and test the faithful. Others maintained that worms were demonic in origin, sent by Satan to torment humanity and corrupt the body that housed the soul. These theological debates influenced treatment approaches, with some remedies focusing on spiritual purification rather than physical intervention. The seasonal timing of worm-related dental problems led to the development of preventive calendars that advised people when to be particularly careful about dental hygiene and diet. Spring and autumn were considered high-risk periods requiring special precautions, while winter was thought to offer natural protection as worms became dormant in cold weather. Summer brought intermediate risks, with worm activity dependent on local climate conditions and rainfall patterns. As you drift toward sleep, your mouth still throbbing from Jeffrey's ministrations, you can't help but appreciate the elegance of the toothworm explanation. It provided a clear cause for dental pain, a logical progression of disease, and hope for effective treatment. The fact that it was completely wrong doesn't diminish its appeal as a comprehensive theory that made sense of a mysterious and universal human affliction. In a world full of inexplicable suffering, the toothworm theory offered the comfort of explanation, even if that explanation was entirely imaginary. You wake the next morning with your jaw still aching from Jeffrey's ministrations, and you realize that removing the tooth was only half the battle. Now you need to find something to ease the persistent pain and prevent the wound from festering into something that might kill you. You shuffle over to the cottage of Dame Margaret, the village herbalist, whose reputation for concocting bizarre but occasionally effective remedies stretches across 3 neighboring parishes. Her tiny house reeks of dried plants, animal parts, and substances you'd rather not identify, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Dame Margaret greets you with a knowing smile, her own mouth conspicuously missing several teeth despite her supposed expertise in dental matters. Ah, another victim of Master Jeffrey's enthusiastic tooth-pulling. She cackles, examining your swollen jaw with fingers that smell like they've been handling rotting fish. Fear not, dearie, I have exactly what you need. She shuffles toward a collection of clay pots and wooden boxes that line every available surface of her cramped dwelling. The medieval approach to herbal dentistry was a fascinating mixture of genuine botanical knowledge, complete superstition, and desperate improvisation. Herbalists like Dame Margaret operated on the principle that nature provided a cure for every ailment. You just had to know where to look and how to prepare it. The fact that many of their remedies were completely ineffective, or occasionally toxic, was considered less important than the theoretical framework that justified their use. First, we'll start with something for the pain. Dame Margaret announces, pulling down a jar filled with what appears to be ground tree bark. Willow bark, soaked in wine and mixed with honey. The ancients knew its power, and modern physicians have confirmed its virtues. She's actually not wrong about this. One willow bark contains salicin, a compound related to aspirin, making it one of the few medieval pain remedies that actually worked through recognizable pharmacological mechanisms. But Dame Margaret isn't content to stick with treatments that make sense. Of course, willow bark alone won't address the root cause of your dental corruption. She continues, reaching for a more exotic container. We need something to combat the evil humors and prevent new worm infestations. She produces a small vial of powder that shimmers with an otherworldly iridescence. Ground unicorn horn, imported at great expense from the northern kingdoms. A pinch of this in your morning ale will purify your blood and make your mouth uninhabitable to dental worms. The unicorn horn trade was one of the more profitable medical frauds of the medieval period. What Dame Margaret is showing you is most likely ground narwhal tusk, sold through a complex network of merchants who understood that people would pay enormous sums for mythical remedies. The powder was completely harmless, which made it superior to many medieval treatments, but it was also completely useless for dental problems. Now, for the immediate treatment of your extraction site, Dame Margaret says, warming to her subject. She begins mixing a paste that combines several different substances, each with its own supposed magical properties. We'll start with ground pearls for purity, add some coral dust for strength, mix in pulverized amber for its preservative qualities, and finish with a touch of powdered emerald for healing. The resulting mixture looks like expensive mud and probably cost more than most people earned in a month. You watch in fascination as Dame Margaret explains the theoretical basis for her concoction. Medieval herbalists believed in the doctrine of signatures, which held that God had marked natural substances with visual clues about their medicinal properties. Pearls were white and pure, so they must purify corrupted tissue. Coral was hard and durable, so it must strengthen weakened teeth. Amber preserved insects for millennia, so it must prevent decay. The logic was impeccable, even if the underlying assumptions were completely wrong. But wait, there's more. Dame Margaret continues with the enthusiasm of a traveling salesman. She produces a small cloth bag filled with what looks like tiny white pellets. These are bezoar stones, taken from the stomachs of wild goats that feed on medicinal herbs. Place one under your tongue each morning, and it will neutralize any poisons that might accumulate in your mouth overnight. Bezoar stones were another expensive medieval remedy based on the belief that certain animals could concentrate healing properties in their digestive systems. The preparation methods for medieval dental remedies were often as elaborate as the ingredients themselves. Dame Margaret demonstrates the proper technique for activating her treatments, which involves grinding the ingredients while reciting specific prayers, mixing them during particular phases of the moon, and storing the finished products in containers blessed by the local priest. The spiritual dimension of herbal medicine was considered just as important as the physical components. For daily maintenance of your dental health, Dame Margaret says, I recommend this specially prepared tooth powder. She shows you a mixture that appears to contain ground charcoal, salt, herbs, and what she claims are tiny fragments of saints' bones. Rub this on your remaining teeth each morning with a cloth, and it will prevent future worm infestations while strengthening the enamel against corruption. The saints' bone fragments were probably animal bones, but their supposed spiritual power was considered essential for effective dental care. Medieval people believed that physical remedies needed spiritual enhancement to be truly effective, leading to a thriving trade in religious relics claimed to have special healing properties for specific ailments. Dame Margaret's next recommendation involves a treatment that sounds suspiciously like medieval chemical warfare. For severe cases of dental corruption, she explains, we use a mouth rinse made from the urine of a virgin boy, mixed with wine that has been blessed by 3 different priests, and heated with a red-hot iron rod. The logic behind this particular remedy is lost to history, but it was apparently popular enough to warrant inclusion in several medieval medical texts. The urine-based treatments weren't limited to dental care. Medieval medicine enthusiastically embraced human waste products as therapeutic agents. Fresh urine was believed to have antiseptic properties, which wasn't entirely wrong, though the medieval understanding of why it worked was completely mystical. The requirement that the urine come from a virgin boy added an extra layer of magical thinking that made the treatment more expensive and supposedly more effective. Now, if you're dealing with persistent pain that won't respond to conventional treatments, Dame Margaret says with a conspiratorial whisper, I have something truly special. She unlocks a small wooden box and reveals what appears to be a collection of dried, blackened objects that might once have been animal parts. These are the preserved reproductive organs of various creatures, each chosen for its specific healing properties. You try not to think too hard about what you're looking at as Dame Margaret explains the theory behind organ-based dental therapy. Medieval medicine operated on the principle of sympathetic magic, which suggested that body parts from healthy animals could transfer their vitality to corresponding parts of sick humans. The reproductive organs were considered particularly powerful because they represented the creative force of life itself. The testicles of a young bull will give your remaining teeth the strength to resist corruption. Dame Margaret continues matter-of-factly. The ovaries of a fertile sow will help your gums regenerate after traumatic extractions. And this, she holds up something that looks like a mummified slug, is the preserved reproductive organ of a hermaphrodite goat, which combines the healing properties of both male and female essences. The hermaphrodite goat organ was apparently the Ferrari of medieval dental remedies, rare, expensive, and claimed to be effective against any conceivable dental problem. The fact that hermaphrodite goats didn't actually exist was less important than the theoretical framework that made such treatments seem logical to medieval minds. Dame Margaret's treatment arsenal also includes what she calls sympathy stones, rocks and crystals that supposedly resonate with different parts of the human body. This red jasper corresponds to blood and can stop excessive bleeding from extraction sites. She explains, holding up a polished stone. This white quartz aligns with bone and teeth, strengthening them against decay. And this green malachite harmonizes with the life force itself, promoting rapid healing of damaged tissue. The crystal-based treatments required elaborate rituals involving specific placement of stones around the patient's head, recitation of prayers, and careful attention to astrological timing. Dame Margaret explains that the stones must be cleansed in spring water under a full moon, charged with healing intention through prolonged meditation, and activated by exposure to the smoke of burning sacred herbs. For the truly desperate cases, Dame Margaret says, lowering her voice to a dramatic whisper, we have the nuclear option. She produces a small vial of dark liquid that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. This is oil extracted from the flesh of a hanged man, mixed with the ground bones of a saint, and aged in a tomb for exactly 13 months. 3 drops on the affected tooth will either cure it completely or kill you outright, but at least your suffering will end. The hanged man's oil was one of the more macabre medieval remedies, based on the belief that violent death concentrated spiritual energy in the victim's body. The oil was supposedly extracted through a complex process involving exposure to moonlight, ritual purification, and prayers for the dead. Its effectiveness was considered proportional to the injustice of the original execution. The more innocent the victim, the more powerful the resulting medicine. Historians still argue whether medieval herbalists genuinely believed in the effectiveness of their more exotic remedies, or whether they continued prescribing them because desperate patients demanded dramatic treatments for desperate conditions. The evidence suggests that most practitioners were sincere in their beliefs, even when those beliefs led them to recommend treatments that were obviously dangerous or absurd. Dame Margaret concludes your consultation by preparing a comprehensive treatment package that includes multiple remedies to be used in careful sequence. Start with the willow bark wine for immediate pain relief. Apply the gemstone paste to the extraction site twice daily. Take the unicorn horn powder with your morning meal, and use the tooth cleaning powder before sleep. If the pain persists after a week, we'll move on to the more aggressive treatments. As you leave Dame Margaret's cottage with your collection of expensive and bizarre remedies, you reflect on the medieval approach to dental medication. It was a world where genuine botanical knowledge coexisted with complete fantasy, where the placebo effect was considered evidence of spiritual intervention, and where the line between medicine and magic was so blurred as to be non-existent. The treatments might not cure your dental problems, but they offered something almost as valuable: hope, explanation, and the comforting belief that someone understood what was wrong and knew how to fix it. You're kneeling in the drafty stone cathedral at dawn, your jaw still throbbing despite Dame Margaret's expensive remedies, when you remember that medieval dental care wasn't just about earthly treatments, it was fundamentally a spiritual battle. Your tooth pain isn't merely a medical condition. It's a sign of divine displeasure, demonic influence, or perhaps a test of your faith. The massive wooden crucifix looming above the altar seems to watch you with carved eyes that understand suffering, and you know that your path to dental relief must include prayer, pilgrimage, and the intercession of saints who specialize in oral afflictions. The medieval Catholic Church had developed an impressively organized system for addressing dental problems through divine intervention. Just as there were patron saints for every conceivable human activity, from brewing beer to shoeing horses, there were specific saints who handled dental emergencies. These weren't minor religious figures relegated to obscure chapels. They were major players in the medieval spiritual economy, with dedicated shrines, feast days, and elaborate rituals designed to secure their favor for suffering teeth. Brother Thomas, the monastery's infirmarian, approaches you with the confident stride of someone who has guided countless souls through the intersection of faith and dentistry. His own mouth is a testament to medieval dental challenges: several missing teeth and a pronounced lisp that makes his Latin prayers sound like ancient incantations. "My child," he says, Your temporal pain is merely a reflection of spiritual imbalance. Let us address the true source of your affliction. The primary saint for dental problems was Saint Apollonia, a 3rd-century Christian martyr who had achieved sainthood through particularly dental-specific suffering. According to church tradition, Apollonia had all her teeth knocked out by pagan persecutors before being burned alive for refusing to renounce her faith. This made her the obvious choice for intercession in dental matters, and her feast day on February 9th was marked by special services focusing on oral health and divine healing. Brother Thomas leads you to a small side chapel dedicated to Saint Apollonia, where a painted wooden statue depicts the saint holding a large pair of pliers with a tooth clamped in their jaws. The imagery is unmistakably dental, and you notice that numerous other sufferers have left offerings at the base of the statue's small wax teeth, tiny silver coins, and what appear to be actual extracted teeth wrapped in cloth and tied with ribbon. Saint Apollonia understands your suffering because she experienced it herself. Brother Thomas explains as he lights several candles around the shrine. But her intercession requires proper preparation and the correct prayers. You cannot simply ask for relief, you must demonstrate your worthiness through spiritual discipline and material sacrifice. The prayer ritual for dental relief was elaborate and specific. You're instructed to kneel before the statue while reciting a particular sequence of prayers that have been specially composed for dental emergencies. The prayers must be said in Latin, even if you don't understand the language, because the sacred words possess inherent power that transcends human comprehension. Any mistakes in pronunciation or sequence could invalidate the entire ritual, requiring you to start over from the beginning. Brother Thomas hands you a small cloth containing what he claims is a fragment of Saint Apollonia's actual tooth, preserved through centuries of careful custody by various monasteries. The relic is dark brown and roughly the size of a small pebble, though its authenticity is supported by an elaborate parchment certificate bearing multiple seals and signatures. Hold this against your afflicted area while praying, he instructs, and the saint's own dental essence will flow into your corrupted tooth. The medieval trade in dental relics was surprisingly extensive and profitable. Churches and monasteries across Europe claimed to possess teeth, jaw fragments, or other oral remains of Saint Apollonia and other dental saints. These relics were often shared between institutions through elaborate lending arrangements, allowing multiple locations to offer access to the same miraculous healing power. The logistics of relic distribution rivaled those of modern medical supply chains. But Saint Apollonia wasn't the only divine option for dental relief. Brother Thomas explains that different saints specialized in different types of oral problems. Saint Blaise handled throat ailments that might spread to the teeth. Saint Agatha was invoked for breast problems that could cause referred dental pain. And Saint Christopher offered protection for travelers whose dental emergencies occurred far from home. The key was matching your specific situation with the appropriate celestial specialist. For your particular case, Brother Thomas says after careful consideration, I recommend a combined approach involving multiple saints. Saint Apollonia for the immediate pain, Saint Blaise for preventing the corruption from spreading to your throat, and Saint Agatha for overall purification of the feminine humors that might be contributing to your dental weakness. Medieval gender theory suggested that women were particularly susceptible to dental problems due to their inherently unstable spiritual and physical constitutions. The prayer schedule for comprehensive dental relief was demanding. You're instructed to attend special early morning masses dedicated to dental saints, participate in afternoon prayer circles focused on oral health, and conclude each day with private devotions involving specific psalms and canticles. The entire routine requires approximately 4 hours of daily religious observance, which Brother Thomas assures you is a small price to pay for divine dental intervention. Medieval churches also offered what could be considered religious dental insurance through the practice of prophylactic prayers. For a modest annual donation, the monastery would include your name in regular prayers for dental health, theoretically protecting you from future tooth problems through ongoing divine surveillance. The most expensive packages included quarterly blessings with authentic relics and priority access to emergency prayer services during dental crises. Brother Thomas shows you a collection of ex-votos left by previous dental patients whose prayers had been answered. These votive offerings include small silver teeth, miniature pliers crafted from precious metals, and paintings depicting dramatic scenes of dental healing. One particularly elaborate offering shows a woman kneeling before Saint Apollonia while tiny angels extract a glowing tooth from her mouth, with demons fleeing in the background. The key to successful prayer therapy, Brother Thomas explains, is understanding that dental problems are often manifestations of spiritual corruption that requires comprehensive treatment. Your tooth pain might be caused by unconfessed sins, inadequate charitable giving, or insufficient devotion to the saints. We must address these underlying spiritual issues before expecting physical relief. This leads to what could charitably be called medieval religious therapy sessions. You're encouraged to examine your conscience for any behaviors that might have angered God and contributed to your dental affliction. Have you been sufficiently generous to the poor? Have you harbored resentment against your neighbors? Have you taken the Lord's name in vain during moments of particularly intense tooth pain? Each potential spiritual failing must be confessed and addressed through appropriate penance. The penance prescribed for dental-related sins was often elaborate and expensive. You might be required to undertake a pilgrimage to a distant shrine, commission prayers from multiple monasteries, or make substantial donations to church construction projects. Brother Thomas explains that the severity of your dental problem correlates directly with the magnitude of penance required. More painful teeth demand more intensive spiritual intervention. The monastery's library contains several illuminated manuscripts dedicated specifically to dental prayer and religious oral care. Brother Thomas shows you the Librum Dentium Sanctorum, a beautifully illustrated text that contains prayers for every conceivable dental emergency. There are specific invocations for broken teeth, infected gums, wisdom tooth eruption, and even bad breath that might interfere with proper pronunciation of prayers. Each prayer is accompanied by detailed instructions about proper posture, timing, and spiritual preparation. Medieval pilgrimage routes included several destinations specifically associated with dental healing. The shrine of Saint Apollonia in Bologna attracted thousands of dental sufferers annually, while a monastery in France claimed to possess her complete lower jaw and offered specialized healing services. The journey to these locations was considered an essential part of the treatment, as the physical hardship of travel demonstrated sincere commitment to spiritual healing. The monastery also offered what might be called religious dental procedures. Blessed water could be used to rinse the mouth, consecrated oil could be applied to afflicted teeth, and special prayers could be recited while touching the painful area. These rituals were performed by ordained clergy who had received training in the intersection of spiritual and dental care, making them the medieval equivalent of religious medical specialists. Brother Thomas introduces you to the concept of dental indulgence as spiritual benefits that could be applied to reduce the afterlife consequences of sins that might have contributed to your tooth problems. For appropriate donations, the church could provide certificates guaranteeing reduced time in purgatory for dental-related spiritual failings. The prices were carefully calibrated to your ability to pay, with wealthy merchants requiring larger contributions than poor peasants. The theological framework underlying medieval religious dentistry was surprisingly sophisticated. Church scholars had developed elaborate theories about the spiritual significance of different teeth, the moral implications of dental pain, and the divine purpose behind oral suffering. Front teeth were associated with pride and vanity, molars with gluttony and material excess, and wisdom teeth with the challenges of spiritual maturity. You learn about the elaborate hierarchy of dental saints, each with specific jurisdictions and areas of expertise. Saint Bartholomew was invoked for teeth that had been violently extracted, since he had been flayed alive and understood traumatic injury. Saint Lawrence, who was roasted on a gridiron, specialized in burning dental pain. Saint Sebastian, pierced by multiple arrows, handled sharp, stabbing tooth pain. The medieval mind found comfort in knowing that every type of suffering had a corresponding celestial advocate. The monastery's dental prayer services were conducted with the same solemnity as major religious festivals. Special vestments were worn, specific musical arrangements were performed, and elaborate processions carried dental relics through the cathedral. These services attracted large crowds of sufferers, creating a sense of community among those afflicted with oral pain and reinforcing the belief that dental problems were serious spiritual matters deserving divine attention. Brother Thomas explains the complex relationship between dental health and moral purity. Medieval theology suggested that the mouth was the gateway between the soul and the physical world, making dental problems particularly significant for spiritual well-being. Rotten teeth could corrupt prayers before they reached God. Bad breath could offend saints, and dental pain could distract from proper religious observance. This made dental care a religious obligation, not just a personal comfort issue. The monastery scriptorium produced specialized prayer books for dental sufferers, written in vernacular languages so that illiterate patients could have them read aloud by family members. These books contained not only prayers but also dietary advice based on religious principles, moral guidance for enduring pain without sin, and instructions for maintaining spiritual purity despite physical corruption. Historians still argue whether medieval people genuinely believed that prayer could cure dental problems or whether religious treatment was simply the only available option for managing chronic pain. The evidence suggests that most people approached dental prayer with sincere faith, even when they also sought medical treatment from barber surgeons and herbalists. The combination of spiritual and physical remedies was considered more effective than either approach alone. The economic impact of religious dental care was substantial. Churches derived significant income from dental-related offerings, relic viewing fees, and specialized prayer services. Some monasteries developed reputations as dental healing centers, attracting pilgrims from across Europe and generating enough revenue to fund major construction projects and manuscript production. The seasonal calendar of dental saints provided a framework for ongoing oral health management. February was dominated by Saint Apollonia's feast day, but other months had their own dental observances. Saint Blaise was honored in early February, creating a week-long focus on throat and dental health. Various local saints with dental connections were celebrated throughout the year, ensuring regular opportunities for spiritual dental maintenance. Brother Thomas concludes your religious consultation by providing you with a comprehensive spiritual dental care package. You receive a small medallion bearing Saint Apollonia's image, a prayer card containing specific Latin phrases for home dental devotions, a vial of water blessed at her shrine, and a schedule of upcoming monastery services focused on oral health. Remember, he says solemnly, faith without works is dead, but works without faith are merely expensive ways to distract yourself from suffering. The integration of religious and medical dental care in medieval society created a unique therapeutic environment where physical treatment was always accompanied by spiritual intervention. Your barber surgeon might extract your tooth. Your herbalist might provide pain relief, but only the church could address the fundamental spiritual causes of dental disease and offer hope for both temporal relief and eternal salvation. As you leave the cathedral with your religious dental care package, you reflect on how medieval society had created comprehensive support systems for dealing with dental problems. Every aspect of oral suffering had been addressed through elaborate institutional responses, from the practical tools of barber surgeons to the mystical remedies of herbalists to the divine intervention of religious specialists. Your tooth might still hurt, but at least you knew that Saint Apollonia was personally invested in your oral health, and that your suffering had meaning within the grand cosmic plan of divine justice and mercy. You're invited to witness the most exclusive dental suffering in medieval Europe as you enter the royal palace, where even kings and queens must endure the agony of tooth decay. The irony is delicious literally, in this case because the very wealth that allows royalty to afford sugar, exotic spices, and elaborate feasts is precisely what destroys their teeth faster than any peasant's humble diet ever could. You're about to discover that privilege in the medieval world came with its own unique set of dental horrors, and that money could buy many things, but reliable dental care wasn't one of them. King Edward sits slumped in his ornate throne, one jeweled hand pressed against his swollen cheek while the other grips the armrest with white knuckles. Despite his crown, royal robes, and absolute power over millions of subjects, he's reduced to the same helpless agony that plagues his poorest peasant. The difference is that Edward's pain comes with a side of humiliation. A king who can't eat properly, speak clearly, or concentrate on affairs of state because of tooth pain isn't projecting the image of divine authority that medieval kingship requires. His Majesty has been suffering for 3 weeks, whispers Sir Geoffrey, the royal physician, as he leads you through the opulent chamber toward the throne. We've tried everything: the finest physicians from Paris, sacred relics from Canterbury, even a special emissary to procure unicorn horn from the northern kingdoms. Nothing provides more than temporary relief. The king's dental crisis has become a diplomatic issue, with neighboring monarchs sending their own court physicians and miracle cures as gestures of alliance and concern. Medieval royal dental care represented the absolute pinnacle of what money and power could buy, which unfortunately wasn't very much in terms of actual effectiveness. Royal physicians were certainly more educated than village barber surgeons, having studied at universities and read classical medical texts, but their theoretical knowledge was often more hindrance than help when dealing with practical dental problems. They knew elaborate explanations for why teeth hurt, but their treatments were just as brutal and ineffective as those available to commoners. King Edward's current dental crisis began with what his physicians delicately termed an excess of sanguine humors brought on by rich living. In practical terms, this meant that years of consuming expensive imported sugar, dried fruits, and elaborate pastries had rotted his teeth from the inside out. The royal diet was a dental nightmare disguised as luxury. Constant access to the very foods that medieval teeth couldn't handle, combined with the social obligation to appear strong and healthy at all times. You observe the king's morning dental ritual, an elaborate ceremony that involves half a dozen attendants and enough expensive equipment to outfit a small army. the royal tooth cleaner, a specialized servant whose entire career depends on maintaining the king's oral hygiene, approaches with a collection of tools that would make a modern dentist weep. There are tiny brushes made from exotic animal hairs, tooth powders containing ground pearls and precious stones, and mouth rinses infused with rare herbs and blessed by important bishops. The royal tooth powder alone costs more than most people earn in a lifetime. It contains crushed diamonds for hardness, ground emeralds for healing, pulverized rubies for strength, and gold leaf for purity. The theory was that precious stones contained concentrated essences of perfection that could transfer their qualities to whatever they touched. The reality was that rubbing gemstone dust on rotten teeth was an expensive way to accomplish absolutely nothing, but it looked impressively royal. Queen Isabella enters the chamber, and you immediately notice that her smile is carefully controlled to hide her own dental problems. Royal women faced additional challenges because their social role required them to be not only healthy but beautiful, and missing or blackened teeth definitely didn't fit the medieval ideal of feminine perfection. Isabella has mastered the art of speaking without fully opening her mouth and smiling without showing her teeth, turning dental damage control into a refined courtly skill. The French ambassador will arrive next week. Isabella murmurs to her husband, and you must be able to receive him properly. The diplomatic implications of royal dental problems were serious in an age when personal meetings between monarchs could determine the fate of nations. A king who couldn't speak clearly, eat publicly, or project strength and health might find his political position weakened along with his jaw. The Royal Dental Emergency Team includes some of the most expensive medical talent available in medieval Europe. Master Henri, the court physician, studied at the University of Paris and claims to have treated the Pope himself for dental problems. Master Alfonso, a Moorish physician, brings knowledge of Islamic dental techniques that were more advanced than European methods. Master Giovanni, an Italian surgeon, specializes in the most extreme dental procedures and carries a collection of instruments that look like they were designed for medieval torture. You watch as the three masters examine the king's mouth with the solemnity of generals planning a military campaign. They peer into his mouth with polished metal mirrors, probe his teeth with delicate golden instruments, and debate the finer points of royal dental theory in a mixture of Latin, Arabic, and Italian. Their diagnosis is unanimous: the king's pain is caused by an exceptionally large and aggressive toothworm that has established a colony in his upper right molar. The treatment plan they propose would bankrupt a small kingdom and might very well kill the patient, but it represents the absolute cutting edge of medieval dental care. First, they'll attempt to lure the toothworm out using a mixture of honey and powdered unicorn horn, heated over a sacred flame and applied while priests chant specific prayers. If that fails, they'll try to poison the worm using a preparation made from the ground bones of 7 different saints, mixed with wine that has been blessed by the Archbishop of Canterbury himself. As a final resort, they're prepared to perform what they call royal extraction, removal of the tooth using instruments crafted specifically for the procedure from pure gold and silver. The theory is that precious metals possess inherent purity that will prevent the corruption from spreading to other teeth. The reality is that gold and silver are softer than steel, making them terrible materials for dental instruments, but they look appropriately regal while failing to work. The king's dental problems aren't limited to his current crisis. You learn that Edward has been dealing with oral issues for most of his adult life, a common problem among medieval royalty who had access to the very foods that destroyed teeth most efficiently. His dental history reads like a catalog of medieval dental horrors: multiple extractions, experimental treatments, and desperate attempts to find remedies that would allow him to maintain his royal dignity while enduring constant pain. Royal dental records, maintained by court scribes with the same care given to diplomatic correspondence and military records, reveal the progression of medieval elite dental disease. King Edward's father lost 12 teeth by age 30. His grandfather was completely toothless by 40. And various royal relatives suffered from dental problems that affected their ability to rule effectively. The royal bloodline was being undermined by tooth decay as surely as by any military enemy. The social implications of royal dental problems extended far beyond personal suffering. Medieval kingship was based on the concept of divine right, which suggested that monarchs were chosen by God and endowed with special qualities that made them superior to ordinary people. Dental problems that rendered kings weak, pained, and unable to function normally challenged this fundamental assumption about royal nature. Court etiquette had evolved elaborate protocols for managing royal dental crises. When the king was suffering from tooth pain, certain types of meetings were postponed, specific foods were removed from royal menus, and court musicians were instructed to play softer, more soothing compositions. The entire machinery of medieval government had to adjust to accommodate the royal mouth's limitations. Queen Isabella's own dental struggles provide insight into how medieval royal women navigated the intersection of dental problems and social expectations. She's developed techniques for eating in public that minimize the need for heavy chewing, speaking in ways that disguise dental speech impediments, and smiling that conceals missing or damaged teeth. Her ladies-in-waiting have been trained to recognize signs of dental distress and provide discreet assistance during public appearances. The royal children's dental care represents an attempt to prevent the dental disasters that plague their parents. Young Prince William and Princess Margaret are subjected to daily dental inspections, restricted diets designed to minimize tooth decay, and preventive treatments that combine the latest medical theories with traditional protective magic. Their teeth are regularly blessed by court chaplains, cleaned with the finest imported materials, and monitored by a team of specialists who hope to break the cycle of royal dental destruction. The economic impact of royal dental problems was staggering. King Edward's current dental crisis has already cost the equivalent of a major military campaign, with expenses for rare medicines, expert consultations, and elaborate treatments that produce minimal results. The Royal Treasury maintains a specific budget line for dental emergencies, recognizing that royal oral health is a matter of national security as much as personal comfort. Historians still argue whether medieval royalty actually received better dental care than commoners or whether their wealth simply allowed them to purchase more expensive ways to suffer. The evidence suggests that royal dental treatment was more elaborate and costly but not necessarily more effective than what was available to ordinary people. In some cases, the complex and exotic treatments preferred by royal physicians were actually more dangerous than the simple remedies used by village healers. The diplomatic consequences of royal dental problems extended throughout medieval Europe. Marriages were arranged with consideration for the dental health of potential spouses. Trade negotiations might be delayed if a key monarch was incapacitated by tooth pain, and military campaigns could be affected by a king's inability to function effectively due to oral suffering. Master Henri finally announces that the king's treatment will begin immediately, using a combination of the most advanced techniques available to medieval medicine. The procedure will take place in the royal chapel, with prayers being offered throughout the process and holy relics positioned around the patient to provide spiritual protection. The entire court will participate in a special mass requesting divine intervention in the royal dental crisis. As you observe the beginning of the king's treatment, you're struck by the fundamental democracy of dental pain. Wealth, power, and divine appointment mean nothing when toothworms are gnawing through your jaw. King Edward's agony is identical to that experienced by the poorest peasant, and his prospects for relief are only marginally better despite access to the finest medical care money can buy. In the kingdom of dental pain, everyone is equal, and crowns provide no protection against the universal human experience of oral suffering. The royal dental crisis continues, with the most powerful man in England reduced to a pain-racked shadow of his former self, dependent on physicians whose confidence far exceeds their competence. It's a humbling reminder that medieval medicine, no matter how expensive or elaborately theorized, remained fundamentally powerless against the simple reality of tooth decay. You're stepping through the gates of Córdoba in Islamic Spain, where the year 1200 feels like the future compared to the dental stone age you've left behind in Northern Europe. The contrast is immediate and stunning. While European Christians are still debating whether toothworms are invisible or merely microscopic, Islamic physicians are performing actual dental surgery, writing comprehensive medical texts, and developing techniques that won't be matched in Christian Europe for another 3 centuries. Welcome to the medieval Islamic golden age of dentistry, where scientific observation trumps superstition and medical advancement flourishes under the guidance of scholars who view the human body as a puzzle to be solved rather than a mystery to be endured. The House of Wisdom in Córdoba rivals any institution in the medieval world, and you're fortunate enough to be granted an audience with Ibn Sina al-Asnan, known to his European contemporaries as the Tooth Master. His library alone contains more dental knowledge than exists in all of Christian Europe combined. Translated Greek texts, original Arabic research, Persian medical innovations, and detailed anatomical drawings that reveal an understanding of dental structure that won't reach Paris or London for generations. Come, says Ibn Sina, gesturing toward his well-lit examination chamber. Let me show you what we have learned about the true nature of dental disease. His workspace is a revelation, clean, organized, and filled with instruments that actually look like they're designed for medical rather than military purposes. Instead of the rusty pliers and crude hammers favored by European barber surgeons, you see delicate probes, precisely crafted forceps, and tools that suggest their makers understood the anatomy they were meant to address. The Islamic approach to dental problems began with the revolutionary concept that observation and experimentation should guide treatment rather than ancient authority and religious doctrine. While European physicians were still arguing about the theoretical implications of humoral imbalances, Islamic doctors were dissecting cadavers, studying tooth development, and documenting the actual progression of dental disease through careful clinical observation. Ibn Sina shows you a manuscript that would be considered heretical in Christian Europe, detailed anatomical drawings of human skulls and jaws based on actual dissection rather than classical speculation. We have learned, he explains, that teeth are not simply bones that happen to grow in the mouth, but specialized structures with their own blood supply, nerve connections, and patterns of development. Understanding their true nature allows us to treat them more effectively. The Islamic medical tradition had inherited and expanded upon the dental knowledge of ancient Greece and Rome, but they didn't stop there. Islamic physicians systematically tested classical theories against clinical evidence, discarding treatments that didn't work and developing new approaches based on actual results. This empirical method led to genuine advances in dental care that were centuries ahead of European practice. You watch Ibn Sina examine a patient using techniques that seem almost modern in their systematic approach. He begins with a careful visual inspection, noting the pattern and extent of decay, then uses a small probe to test the depth of cavities and assess the condition of surrounding tissue. His diagnosis is based on observable evidence rather than theoretical speculation about invisible worms or humoral imbalances. This patient, Ibn Sina explains, suffers from what we call progressive dental corruption caused by dietary acids and insufficient cleaning. We have observed that certain foods, particularly those containing concentrated sweetness, create conditions that promote tooth destruction. We have also learned that regular cleaning with appropriate materials can prevent much dental disease. His explanation is startlingly accurate by modern standards, demonstrating an understanding of dental chemistry that European physicians wouldn't achieve for centuries. The Islamic treatment approach emphasized preservation over extraction whenever possible, while European practitioners routinely yanked out any tooth that caused problems. Islamic physicians had developed techniques for cleaning cavities, applying protective substances, and even attempting primitive forms of filling. Their success rate wasn't perfect, but it was dramatically better than the all-or-nothing approach favored in Christian Europe. Ibn Sina demonstrates the Islamic technique for cavity treatment, using a small, heated instrument to clean decay from the patient's tooth while explaining the theoretical basis for the procedure. We have learned that dental corruption spreads from affected areas to healthy tissue, much like fire spreads through dry wood. By removing the corrupted material and sealing the remaining structure, we can often preserve the tooth and prevent further damage. The instruments used in Islamic dental practice were marvels of medieval engineering. You examine forceps designed with different angles and gripping surfaces for specific types of extractions, probes calibrated to measure cavity depth without causing additional damage, and even primitive dental mirrors that allow physicians to see areas of the mouth that would otherwise be hidden. These tools represent centuries of refinement based on practical experience rather than theoretical requirements. Islamic dental education was formal, systematic, and based on the apprenticeship system that had produced the most skilled physicians in the medieval world. Students spent years learning dental anatomy, practicing techniques on cadavers, and observing experienced practitioners before being allowed to treat patients independently. This rigorous training produced specialists whose skills far exceeded those of European generalists who learned dental extraction as a side skill to barbering. The patient you're observing receives what Ibn Sina calls comprehensive oral treatment, a systematic approach that addresses not just the immediate problem, but the underlying conditions that contributed to dental disease. This includes dietary counseling about foods that promote or prevent tooth decay, instruction in proper cleaning techniques using tools and materials that actually work, and ongoing monitoring to catch problems before they become severe. We have observed, Ibn Sina continues, that dental disease follows predictable patterns and can often be prevented through appropriate care. This knowledge allows us to treat the causes of dental problems rather than merely addressing their symptoms. This preventive approach was revolutionary in a medieval context where most medical treatment was reactive rather than proactive. The Islamic understanding of dental pain was based on anatomical reality rather than mystical speculation. Islamic physicians had identified the nerves that serve teeth, understood how inflammation causes pain, and developed treatments that addressed the actual physiological processes involved in dental suffering. Their pain management techniques, while limited by available materials, were based on sound medical principles rather than wishful thinking. You learn about the Islamic practice of dental prosthetics, artificial teeth, and bridgework that could restore function and appearance to patients who had lost teeth to disease or injury, while European patients simply lived with missing teeth. Islamic craftsmen had developed techniques for creating replacement teeth from ivory, bone, and even precious metals. These prosthetics weren't perfect, but they represented a sophisticated understanding of dental function and aesthetics. The Islamic medical literature contains detailed descriptions of dental procedures that wouldn't be seen in Europe for centuries. There are instructions for treating gum disease, techniques for repositioning crooked teeth, and even primitive forms of oral surgery for more complex problems. These texts were based on clinical experience and careful observation rather than theoretical speculation. Ibn Sina shows you a collection of dental remedies that combine genuine pharmacological knowledge with sophisticated preparation techniques. Islamic physicians had identified herbs and minerals that actually provided pain relief, developed methods for preparing these materials to maximize their effectiveness, and created delivery systems that ensured proper dosage and application. Their success rate with these treatments was dramatically higher than the hit-or-miss approach used in Christian Europe. The broader Islamic approach to medicine emphasized the connection between dental health and overall physical well-being. Islamic physicians understood that dental infections could spread to other parts of the body, that poor dental function affected nutrition and digestion, and that dental pain could influence mental and emotional health. This holistic view led to treatment approaches that addressed the patient as a complete system rather than focusing narrowly on the immediate dental problem. Historians still argue whether Islamic dental advances were primarily due to superior theoretical knowledge, better access to classical texts, or cultural attitudes that encouraged scientific observation and experimentation. The evidence suggests that all three factors played important roles, creating a medical environment that fostered genuine progress in understanding and treating dental disease. The translation movement that brought Greek and Roman medical knowledge into Arabic also facilitated the preservation and expansion of dental knowledge that was being lost in Christian Europe. Islamic scholars didn't just translate classical texts, they tested, corrected, and expanded upon ancient knowledge through their own research and clinical experience. The Islamic emphasis on cleanliness, both for religious and medical reasons, contributed significantly to better dental outcomes. Regular washing, attention to personal hygiene, and cultural practices that promoted cleanliness created an environment where dental disease was less likely to develop and spread. This cultural foundation supported medical practices that were more effective than those used in less hygiene-conscious societies. You observe the systematic approach that Islamic physicians used to document their dental cases, creating detailed records that could be studied to identify patterns and improve treatment outcomes. This early form of clinical research allowed Islamic medicine to advance much more rapidly than European practice, which relied on individual experience and tradition rather than systematic data collection. The training of Islamic dental specialists included instruction in related medical fields, creating practitioners who understood the connections between dental problems and other health issues. This interdisciplinary approach produced physicians who could address complex cases that required coordination between different types of treatment, something that was rare in the more fragmented European medical system. As your visit to Islamic Spain concludes, Ibn Sina provides you with a small treatise on dental care that contains more practical, effective information than all the European dental texts combined. Knowledge, he says, is the enemy of suffering, and ignorance is the ally of disease. We have learned much about the nature of dental problems, and this knowledge allows us to help our patients in ways that would seem miraculous to those who cling to ancient superstitions. The contrast between Islamic and European dental care in the medieval period is a reminder that scientific progress isn't inevitable or uniform. While one civilization was developing sophisticated understanding and effective treatments, another was trapped in theoretical frameworks that prevented genuine advancement. The Islamic Golden Age of dentistry represents what was possible when observation, experimentation, and systematic learning were valued over tradition and authority. You're waking up in your medieval hovel with morning breath that could kill a horse, and you realize that today's dental hygiene routine will be an adventure in creative problem-solving that would make modern dentists weep. There's no toothbrush waiting by your bedside, no minty toothpaste tube, no convenient bottle of mouthwash, just you, your questionable teeth, and whatever medieval cleaning methods you can cobble together from materials that probably shouldn't go anywhere near human mouths. Welcome to the daily dental struggle of ordinary medieval people, where oral hygiene was equal parts necessity, superstition, and desperate improvisation. Your first challenge is finding something to actually clean your teeth with, and the medieval options range from surprisingly effective to absolutely horrifying. The most common approach involves selecting a suitable twig from specific types of trees, chewing one end until it frays into primitive bristles, and using this makeshift toothbrush to scrub away the previous day's accumulation of food particles and dental decay. The key is choosing the right type of wood oak for strength, willow for flexibility, or hazel for its supposed mystical properties that ward off toothworms. You stumble outside to examine the trees near your cottage, looking for a twig that's neither too green nor too dry, neither too thick nor too thin. Medieval dental hygiene was surprisingly particular about these details, with elaborate folklore surrounding the proper selection and preparation of tooth cleaning sticks. The best twigs were supposedly cut during specific phases of the moon, blessed by local wise women, and stored in sacred containers to preserve their tooth cleaning power. The twig preparation process requires more skill than you might expect. You need to chew the end carefully, creating bristles that are firm enough to remove plaque but soft enough not to damage your already vulnerable gums. Too much chewing creates bristles that are too soft to be effective, while too little leaves you with a hard stick that's more likely to injure than help. Medieval people developed considerable expertise in this seemingly simple task, passing down techniques through families like precious trade secrets. But not everyone relied on twigs for dental cleaning. You remember hearing about alternative approaches that ranged from practical to bizarre. Some medieval people used cloth strips to rub their teeth clean, often soaked in various solutions that were supposed to enhance the cleaning process. Others preferred to use their fingernails, carefully shaped and maintained for dental hygiene purposes. The wealthy might invest in imported materials like silk threads or even primitive brushes made from animal bristles. Dame Margaret had mentioned that proper dental cleaning required more than mechanical scrubbing. You needed cleaning solutions that addressed the mystical as well as physical aspects of oral corruption. She had provided you with a selection of medieval tooth cleaning recipes that would make a modern chemist question their life choices. The mildest option involves mixing salt with ground herbs, creating an abrasive paste that could remove surface stains while supposedly providing supernatural protection against toothworms. But salt was expensive, so most people relied on alternatives that were cheaper and supposedly just as effective. You consider the popular medieval practice of using your own urine as a mouth rinse, based on the theory that fresh urine contained purifying properties that could neutralize oral corruption. The Romans had actually started this practice, believing that urine's ammonia content provided antiseptic benefits, and medieval people enthusiastically adopted this cost-effective approach to dental hygiene. The urine rinsing technique required specific timing and preparation. Morning urine was considered most potent, supposedly concentrated with overnight purification processes that made it ideal for dental cleaning. Some practitioners insisted on using only the first stream of the day, while others preferred midstream samples that avoided the impurities that might have accumulated overnight. The social implications of this practice were significant. You needed privacy for collection and discreet consumption to avoid social embarrassment. For those who found urine too unpalatable, medieval dental hygiene offered alternative solutions that were equally questionable. Wine mixed with vinegar created an acidic rinse that could dissolve food particles while providing what people believed was antiseptic action. The problem was that this mixture was also highly corrosive to tooth enamel, potentially causing more damage than the problems it was supposed to solve. But medieval people didn't understand dental chemistry, so anything that seemed to work in the short term was considered a success. You recall the traveling merchant who had demonstrated what he claimed was the ultimate medieval tooth cleaning system. His approach involved a complex sequence of procedures designed to address every aspect of oral hygiene. First, mechanical cleaning with properly prepared twigs, followed by chemical treatment with various rinses, and concluding with spiritual protection through specific prayers and protective charms. The entire routine took nearly an hour and required materials that cost more than most people earned in a week. The merchant's cleaning powders were particularly impressive in their complexity and expense. His basic formula contained ground charcoal for whitening, salt for preservation, dried herbs for flavor, and powdered precious stones for mystical enhancement. Advanced versions included exotic ingredients like ground unicorn horn, powdered dragon scales, and blessed earth from holy sites. The theoretical basis for these formulations was impeccable according to medieval medical theory, even if their practical effectiveness was questionable. Charcoal-based tooth cleaning was actually one of the more sensible medieval dental practices. Activated charcoal does have some legitimate cleaning and whitening properties, making it effective for removing surface stains and absorbing oral bacteria. Medieval people didn't understand the chemistry involved, but they had observed that charcoal treatment seemed to improve tooth appearance and reduce bad breath. The preparation process involved burning specific types of wood under controlled conditions and grinding the resulting charcoal into fine powder. The social aspects of medieval dental hygiene were complex and varied by economic class. Wealthy people could afford elaborate cleaning routines with expensive materials and specialized tools, while poor people made do with whatever was available and free. This created visible class distinctions in dental health that immediately marked social status. Clean, white teeth were a sign of wealth and leisure, while stained, damaged teeth indicated poverty and hard labor. Medieval dental hygiene also had seasonal variations based on available materials and cultural practices. Spring provided fresh herbs and young twigs that were considered most effective for dental cleaning. Summer offered a variety of plants that could be used for different oral health purposes. Autumn was the time for gathering and preserving dental hygiene materials for winter use. Winter dental care relied on stored materials and improvised solutions when fresh options weren't available. The gender differences in medieval dental hygiene were significant and reflected broader social attitudes about appearance and health. Women were expected to maintain better dental hygiene as part of their overall obligation to be attractive and pleasant, while men's dental care was often more perfunctory and focused on function rather than appearance. This created different markets for dental hygiene products, with women's formulations emphasizing whitening and breath improvement, while men's products focused on basic cleaning and pain relief. You experiment with the cleaning twig technique, carefully chewing the end of a hazel branch until it forms primitive bristles. The process is oddly satisfying, creating a tool that actually does seem capable of cleaning teeth effectively. The wood has a mildly bitter taste that's not unpleasant, and the frayed fibers do remove food particles and plaque when used with proper technique. Medieval people might not have understood the science, but they had developed genuinely useful cleaning methods through trial and error. The medieval understanding of bad breath was typically mystical rather than medical. Persistent bad breath was believed to indicate internal corruption that went beyond simple food residue or poor cleaning. It might signal the presence of tooth worms, an imbalance of humors, or even demonic influence that required spiritual as well as physical treatment. This led to breath improvement strategies that combined practical cleaning with protective rituals and supernatural remedies. Herbs played a major role in medieval dental hygiene, with different plants believed to provide specific oral health benefits. Mint and sage were popular for their breath-freshening properties, though they were expensive and not always available. More common alternatives included chewing certain tree barks, eating specific berries, or rinsing with herbal teas made from locally available plants. The effectiveness of these treatments varied widely, but they provided hope and some genuine benefit in an era with limited options. The daily dental routine for most medieval people was necessarily brief and practical. Extended cleaning routines were luxury that few could afford in terms of time or materials. The typical approach involved quick cleaning with whatever materials were available, followed by a rinse with water or other available liquids. More elaborate procedures were reserved for special occasions or when dental problems required intensive treatment. Historians still argue whether medieval dental hygiene practices were generally beneficial or harmful to oral health. The evidence suggests a mixed picture. Some techniques, like twig brushing and herbal rinses, provided genuine benefits, while others, like acidic rinses and abrasive powders, probably caused more damage than they prevented. The overall impact depended on individual choices, available materials, and the specific techniques used. The evolution of medieval dental hygiene shows gradual improvement over time, with successful techniques spreading through communities and ineffective approaches being gradually abandoned. This slow process of trial and error eventually led to practices that were genuinely helpful, though progress was much slower than in other areas of medieval technology where feedback was more immediate and obvious. As you complete your morning dental routine with your improvised twig brush and herb-infused rinse, you reflect on the medieval approach to oral hygiene. It was creative, resourceful, and occasionally effective, representing humanity's eternal struggle to maintain health and dignity in the face of limited knowledge and resources. Your teeth might not be perfectly clean by modern standards, but you've participated in a daily ritual that connected you to generations of people who faced the same basic challenges of keeping their mouths healthy with whatever tools and knowledge they could manage to acquire. You're sitting by your cottage window as the evening sun casts long shadows across the medieval landscape, reflecting on the extraordinary journey you've taken through the strange and sometimes terrifying world of medieval dental care. The empty socket where your tooth once lived has finally stopped throbbing. Dame Margaret's herbal concoctions have provided some genuine relief, and your prayers to Saint Apollonia seem to have been heard, at least partially. As you gently run your tongue over your remaining teeth, you can almost feel the centuries slowly turning, carrying humanity toward a future where dental care will become something approaching an actual science rather than an elaborate exercise in wishful thinking. The medieval approach to dental problems that you've experienced represents a fascinating chapter in the long human struggle against pain, disease, and the fundamental mysteries of our own bodies. What strikes you most forcefully is how medieval people, despite their limited understanding of anatomy and disease, developed elaborate systems for dealing with dental suffering that addressed not just the physical aspects of tooth pain but its emotional, social, and spiritual dimensions as well. They might not have understood bacteria or dental chemistry, but they recognized that dental problems affected every aspect of human life and required comprehensive responses. You think about Master Jeffrey the barber surgeon, with his enthusiastic approach to tooth extraction and his genuine pride in his craft. Despite the brutality of his methods and the questionable nature of his tools, Jeffrey represented humanity's refusal to simply accept suffering as inevitable. He might have caused as much damage as he prevented, but his willingness to take action, to try to help people in pain, reflects something essentially human about the drive to heal and to hope. His techniques were primitive, but his intentions were fundamentally sound, and his confidence provided comfort even when his competence was questionable. Dame Margaret's herbal remedies represent another aspect of medieval dental care that deserves recognition despite its obvious limitations. Her treatments combined genuine botanical knowledge with complete fantasy, but they served important functions beyond their supposed medical effects. They provided hope when hope was scarce, gave people something active to do when facing problems they couldn't control, and created communities of shared experience among those dealing with similar afflictions. The fact that some of her remedies actually worked, even if for reasons she didn't understand, suggests that medieval people were capable of learning from experience even when their theoretical frameworks were completely wrong. The religious dimension of medieval dental care that you experienced with Brother Thomas reveals how thoroughly medieval people integrated spiritual and physical approaches to health problems. The prayers, pilgrimages, and sacred rituals weren't just desperate superstitions. They represented sophisticated systems for managing pain, maintaining hope, and finding meaning in suffering. Modern medicine has largely abandoned this holistic approach, perhaps losing something valuable in the process of gaining scientific rigor. There's something to be said for treatment approaches that address the whole person rather than just the immediate medical problem. Your glimpse into royal dental care demonstrated that wealth and power provided no protection against the fundamental realities of medieval dental disease. King Edward's suffering was identical to that of his poorest subjects, and his access to the most expensive treatments available couldn't overcome the basic limitations of medieval medical knowledge. This democratic nature of dental pain created an interesting social dynamic where even the most powerful people were humbled by tooth problems and forced to depend on the same uncertain remedies available to everyone else. The contrast between medieval European and Islamic dental care that you witnessed represents one of the most striking aspects of your journey. While European Christians were debating the theoretical implications of toothworm behavior, Islamic physicians were developing genuine understanding of dental anatomy and disease processes. This difference illustrates how cultural attitudes toward observation, experimentation, and learning can dramatically affect medical progress. The Islamic approach wasn't perfect, but it was centuries ahead of European practice in terms of both understanding and effectiveness. Your exploration of medieval dental hygiene revealed the ingenuity that people can display when facing daily challenges with limited resources. The twig brushes, herbal rinses, and improvised cleaning techniques might seem primitive by modern standards, but they represented genuine attempts to maintain oral health using available materials and accumulated wisdom. Some of these techniques were actually quite effective, demonstrating that practical knowledge can develop even without scientific understanding of underlying mechanisms. The progression from medieval to modern dental care represents one of the most dramatic advances in human health and quality of life. The journey from toothworm theories to bacterial understanding, from brutal extractions to precision surgery, from acceptance of universal tooth loss to expectations of lifelong dental health, shows how far humanity has traveled in understanding and treating dental problems. This progress wasn't inevitable or automatic, it required countless individual contributions, gradual accumulation of knowledge, and fundamental changes in how people thought about disease and treatment. Yet there's something almost endearing about medieval dental care in all its bizarre complexity. The elaborate theories, exotic remedies, and passionate debates about toothworm behavior reflect humanity's eternal drive to understand and control the mysterious processes that affect our bodies. Medieval people were wrong about almost everything related to dental care, but they were wrong with such creativity, such imagination, and such unwavering confidence that their errors become almost charming in retrospect. The social dimensions of medieval dental problems that you've experienced highlight how thoroughly oral health affects human relationships and social functioning. Dental pain influenced everything from personal conversations to international diplomacy, from romantic relationships to religious observance. Medieval people understood these connections intuitively, even if they couldn't explain them scientifically, and they developed comprehensive support systems for helping people cope with dental problems that affected far more than just their mouths. Historians still argue whether medieval dental care was generally beneficial or harmful compared to simply doing nothing and hoping for the best. The evidence suggests a mixed picture. Some treatments provided genuine relief, others caused additional damage, and many fell somewhere in between. What's certain is that medieval dental care represented humanity's refusal to accept suffering passively, even when the available treatments were based on complete misunderstanding of the underlying problems. The economic aspects of medieval dental care reveal how thoroughly dental problems affected every level of society. From the expensive remedies sought by royalty to the desperate improvisation of peasants, dental care represented a significant economic burden that influenced individual decisions and social policies. The development of specialized dental trades, the international market in exotic remedies, and the integration of dental care into religious and medical institutions show how dental problems created entire economic ecosystems around the management of oral suffering. As you settle deeper into your chair, feeling drowsy as the day's warmth fades and evening coolness begins to creep through your window, you find yourself oddly grateful for the medieval dental experience you've witnessed. It has given you a profound appreciation for modern dental care, certainly, but it has also revealed the remarkable resilience, creativity, and hope that humans can display when facing seemingly insurmountable challenges with inadequate tools and knowledge. The medieval world you've explored was harsh, uncomfortable, and often brutal, but it was also filled with people who refused to give up, who continued searching for solutions even when their methods were completely misguided, and who created communities of support and understanding around shared experiences of suffering. These qualities remain essential to human flourishing, even in our modern world of advanced medical technology and scientific understanding. Your own dental journey, from initial tooth pain through extraction and recovery, has connected you to countless generations of people who faced similar challenges with whatever resources and knowledge they could muster. The specific techniques have changed dramatically, but the fundamental human experience of dental pain, the search for relief, and the hope for better treatments remain constant throughout history. The evening light continues to fade as you reflect on how medieval dental care evolved gradually toward more effective approaches. The process was slow, often interrupted by setbacks and false starts, but it eventually led to genuine progress in understanding and treating dental problems. This gradual accumulation of knowledge, testing of theories, and refinement of techniques represents one of humanity's greatest achievements, the slow but steady conquest of suffering through persistent inquiry and experimentation. As darkness settles over the medieval landscape and you prepare for sleep, you feel a deep sense of connection to the historical process that brought humanity from the primitive dental care you've witnessed to the sophisticated treatments available in the modern world. The journey wasn't easy or straightforward, but it was marked by countless individual acts of courage, curiosity, and compassion that gradually built the foundation for better understanding and more effective treatment of dental problems. Your eyelids grow heavy as you imagine the centuries slowly turning, carrying medieval dental techniques toward gradual improvement and eventual transformation into modern scientific practice. The toothworm theories will eventually give way to bacterial understanding. The brutal extractions will evolve into precision surgery, and the desperate improvisation will develop into systematic preventive care. But the fundamental human qualities that drove medieval people to keep searching for better answers, hope, determination, and refusal to accept suffering as inevitable, remain the driving forces behind all medical progress. The soft sounds of evening settle around you as you drift towards sleep, your mouth finally comfortable after its medieval dental adventure. You're grateful for the journey through dental history, thankful for the progress that has brought better care to modern patients, and peaceful in the knowledge that human ingenuity and compassion continue to drive the eternal quest for relief from suffering. In the gentle darkness, the strange world of medieval dentistry fades into memory, leaving you with a deeper appreciation for both historical resilience and modern achievements in the endless human struggle against pain, disease, and the mysteries of our own bodies. Sweet dreams, and may your teeth never know the particular terrors of medieval dental care.